Welcome to Superchargers. I'm Daniel Thomas. Let's go. G'day guys. When I started podcasting, I had no idea what I was doing, but I am proud to say this episode marks my 100th guest. Podcasting has benefited me in so many ways. By doing the show, I have become a better speaker and a better listener, but ultimately I hope it benefits you. I can't thank you guys enough for the support as the show continues to grow. What better guest to have on the 100th episode than someone who is very successful in the podcasting world? Lindsay McMahon is the co-host of All Ears English. Her podcast is downloaded 8 million times per month globally and has been ranked in Best of Apple Podcast categories in 2018 and 19 and #1 in US education language courses. Lindsay and her podcast have been featured in Podcast Magazine, Language Magazine, and Forbes. If you are thinking of starting a podcast, it's never too late, and now is a better time than ever. Here is my conversation with Lindsay McMahon. You actually, it looks like you got in the game fairly early, 2013. So I'm
Correct.
wondering what led you to take that
Yes.
leap back then.
First of all, thanks for having me on for your 100th episode. That is super exciting. I got in the game early. It was 2013 when we launched All Ears English, and it just came out of my experience traveling the world. I was interested in ESL. First of all, our show is a show for non-native English speakers who are learning English as a second language, adults who want to do business around the world. Right? So if you're based in Japan and you occasionally go to the New York office for training or corporate meetings, or you have conference calls with the London office, that is who we help. We launched early. We were excited about teaching English as a second language in a different way. And so it was really just true to our industry. We wanted to create something better.
So you were teaching in person before that?
Correct. Yeah, I had been teaching in Tokyo. I had taught for a year and a half in Japan, which is a whole other story we can go into, but living abroad definitely inspired me. Yeah.
I'm always up for the living abroad, having lived living in Germany now. I think there's this thing sort of once you leave home, wherever that may be, and make a life in another country, there's this sort of, call it metaphorical thing of like, there's no kind of turning back. Like it changes you in so many ways. Was going to Japan the first big step away from where you'd grown up?
Yeah, I think it was. I was young. I was right out of college. So I think I was 23, 22, 23, something like that. And yeah, it was my first, I had studied abroad in college, but other than that, and Japan is such a different place from the US. I mean, the culture is just so different, but I wanted that. I wanted something so different because when you're 23, I mean, I wasn't ready to jump into the job market yet. I knew I needed to see the world. It's such a cliche, but it's true. And you're right. I think it changes you forever.
I'm a huge fan of Japanese culture, actually, like film and kind of the martial arts training I've done and the Zen. It sounds like an amazing place, but I haven't got there yet.
Oh, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. You have to travel there. It's great. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you took this leap into the podcasting world, was it very much a kind of learning by doing, or did you have like a set? It sounded like you were pretty clear from the get-go what you were aiming at, or did you sort of build the plane in the air, so to speak?
I think we built the plane in the air. I think in 2013, that was the only way to do it. Honestly, there was like one PDF guide online about how to submit your show to Apple. There was nothing. There were none of these like podcasts on how to podcast, courses on how to do it. There was nothing out there. And so we really just had to kind of figure out all the technology. But in terms of what we wanted to do in our industry, I think we knew that we were on to something. And when I say we, I say my co-founder, my co-host at that time, who ended up leaving the company after a year. But then I just continued things and hired my co-host, which has been a great decision. We knew that we could add value. We knew that there was a gap that needed to be filled. And we saw that adult learners wanted something a little different than what they were getting in the classroom.
It's easy to forget how recent how fast this has grown? Because like 2000, like as you're saying, there wasn't a lot of material out there, like how to get it going. But this is only
No,
2013. Like it's
not
really
10 years, 11 years ago.
so.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you how do you what do you think about the current state of podcasting and where it's going?
I mean, I'm excited. I think the more we see new podcasts launching, the better, right? It's not more competition. It just means more resources, more energy around the industry as we see new shows launching. I think there's, of course, like any industry online, there's a myth of the get rich quick thing. I'm going to launch a show, it's going to take off. That is so the contrary. We did so many things. We worked. We publish 5 days a week on our show, and we've never missed that. We have been publishing 5 or 4 days a week on our show for the last 11 years, and we haven't stopped. It's really, really hard work. But if you love it and if you feel like this medium suits you or you're able to best express yourself through podcasting, then you'll feel that in your gut and you should keep going. Right. But it's not for everyone. Some people like video, you know? Yeah.
That's crazy that you were pumping out so many so early on, because it felt it, perhaps to me, I could be wrong, but it was like initially there were shows that were just, and there still are doing one episode a week or whatever. But as it's grown, there's been this emphasis that you have to pump out more and more and more. The fact that you guys were just into that from point one is pretty kind of remarkable.
It's crazy. And we still do it. And so there's an argument between quality over quantity. We think that all our episodes are high quality and we have a large quantity. Now that means we don't have a studio in downtown Denver that we go into with perfectly lined walls with audio perfect, but our audio is good and it's good enough. I've never had any complaints about our audio. We use high-end mics. We do just everything we need to do without going, off the wall in terms of investment. We have good systems. We basically, the other upside of publishing so frequently is that we get our listeners a little bit hooked. I mean, a show that you listen to once a week, in terms of getting addicted to it, a little harder. Once every 2 weeks, a little harder. 4 days a week, 5 days a week, that's something you becomes part of your daily routine. And once you're in that, which we are with a lot of our listeners, then you've got like lifelong fans. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was just thinking of those early days myself and some of the like blatantly obvious mistakes I made. Like one of my first interviews, I have a friend and he's literally like a mountain of a man. He's over 6 foot. He's a huge guy.
Wow.
And I had him in my lounge room to interview him, and I sat him in like 100-year-old wooden chair, and the thing for the entire interview just creaked the whole way through the entire interview.
That's so funny.
But I mean, common sense would have said, dude, don't sit a mountain of a person in a wooden chair. But I just had to learn these things by making. And I think that's the beauty of podcasting is this. You just mentioned systems and things that you have running now.
Yes.
But it's almost like as soon as you get into new territory, because there's always new territory as you grow, then you're just learning a whole thing. Like I only recently got accepted for the kind of the advertising.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm accepted now. But then I had to learn that once you're accepted, there's a whole world there of how that works and how payments and things. So I was like, every time you sort of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is. Yeah, sure. Go
it
ahead.
opens a new world every tier that you step up.
100%. But that's what I love about entrepreneurship, right? I mean, you have to learn something every day, especially as the owner of the business. There's no one to go out and figure it out for you. At least we have a small team, but I just don't necessarily have someone right here like figure this out, figure that out. I'm often going and figuring things out. And every week it's something new, or every month I'm learning something new. And then it just becomes normal. It's like, of course, I'm invoicing these sponsors. Yes, no problem. It's part of my workflow now, right? I mean, yeah, it's challenging, but it's good. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think it suits people who perhaps have a kind of entrepreneurial DIY spirit. Podcasting's so awesome for that because you can get some very basic equipment just to kick it off, and then you go down this road of like kind of rapid learning. again, it's very impressive that you guys were so consistent because I struggled with consistency early on, and a lot of
Yeah.
that has been refined now because early on I couldn't align times with people around the world, and I had all this kind of scheduling issue, and I was just spending so much time. But now with all these systems in place, it kind of
Yeah.
alleviated that, and I've been able to be much more consistent. But I would say consistency is a huge part of it. But the fact that you guys seem to have been very consistent from day one is
Yeah.
great.
On your show, do you do just guest interviews or do you ever do a solo, just you on the
I
show or any
I
co-host or anything?
I used to do me doing some of these challenges that I've talked about, and then
Mm-hmm.
I just very much went down the interview path. Um, but I would perhaps like to introduce a combination
Yeah.
in time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's allowed us to be that consistent is that we do guest interviews, but it's maybe 10% of our content.
Mm.
Um and so like I said I hired my team as co-hosts and we have 3 shows now. One of the All Ears English is the biggest one. It gets about 4.5 million downloads a month. So it's the big successful one. But the other 2 are kind of more niche topics. We have 3 of us, no, 4 of us that are on all 3 shows. So on All Ears English, I've got 2 rotating co-hosts. So it's shared within the team, and the team knows the podcast gets published every week, 5 times a week. They know it. It's non-negotiable. So that helps us to be able to make sure it happens. I think if I did 100% guest, it would be a little harder. It's
Mm.
doable because I've seen it. I mean, you see EO Fire, right? Entrepreneur on Fire. It's been a while since I've listened to them, but I know they have guests, 100% guests, and they publish 7 days a week. So it is doable. It's just maybe a little trickier.
Mm. I was listening to one of your episodes and something really stuck out, resonated with me. I don't want to butcher this. You said that you value human connection over a language skill,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is
That is, yeah.
awesome because you're offering this tangible skill, obviously. But that's what I'm seeking as well is this human connection.
Yeah.
And I hope that listeners get practical and usable stuff out of it, but essentially at the core, creating a community and human connection. So obviously that's important to you.
Oh my God, it's huge. Yeah, that's our whole thing. And that's our big differentiator. And it's something we feel deeply. At least I can tell you, it's out of my own experience traveling in South America and feeling quite disconnected, trying to learn Spanish and being the only non native speaker in a group of native Spanish speakers and feeling awkward, feeling anxiety around that, and then coming into launching this show and thinking, oh my gosh, that's it, that's why we're learning this language. It's ironic that we spend so much time as adult language learners being anxious over our mistakes when we miss the connection moment. You can still
Mm,
make the mistake, you can use the wrong grammar, but still connect. You can make the eye contact, you can laugh at yourself, make a joke, you can tell a story. Like you can find that connection despite your mistakes. So that's what our whole show revolves around. Yeah, we teach the vocabulary, we teach the grammar, of course, but there is something deeper that matters to each one of us, and that's that connection.
that's huge because here in Germany, trying to speak German, which is grammatically like rocket science. And as somebody who's quite hard on myself in terms of getting things right, I
Yeah.
often can lose the folk. I believe I can connect with people through a universal language if I'm struggling with the German, exactly like you're saying. But that's
Yeah.
been a real challenge, and I think I've missed a lot of moments because I'm just trying to get all the grammar and all that stuff right, and it misses the opportunity to just
Yes.
have this simple exchange.
Yeah, that's what it is. Don't miss the moments. They're
Yeah,
everywhere. Don't miss them, you know? So 100%.
yeah. When it comes to there's just so many aspects to it. When it comes to launching a show, I've heard a lot of different kind of approaches. I get it's very dependent on what type of show it is, I guess, as well. So,
Hmm.
is there any
Yeah.
key things when it comes to the actual launch that you recommend?
Sure. So we just launched our most recent one in October of 2022. So 2 years ago now. So I have a little bit of recent knowledge. You know, a big thing is having a practical strategy is launching with not just one trailer. Don't just launch a trailer and say this is coming soon or one episode. Launch 6 episodes. And the reason for that is that when I discover a new podcast, maybe someone tells me about it, or the current show I'm listening to says this new show is launching, go subscribe. If there's one trailer in their feed, I'm probably not going to subscribe because I don't know when they're publishing next. I don't want to get excited and find out you publish once a month. There's a lot of factors, but if I can listen to 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes, I see, okay, I like their content. I think they're probably going to publish soon. It seems like they create a lot of content. I'm more likely to hit follow, and that's where you can catch, I don't want to say algorithm, but you can kind of get on the right side of things on Apple and Spotify by getting people to follow your show. And then it just becomes a positive snowball effect. So that's kind of a practical piece of advice. Don't just put one episode out there and make people wait and wonder when your next one is coming.
It's still around, I guess. The term pod fade was a term for a while there, where you come out the blocks. And I know I did this early on as well with my kind of inconsistency until I really got those systems around it and just got very consistent with it. But yeah, this danger of pod fade, where it just peters off, or you get disheartened because you're in this sea of podcasts and you're not seeing the growth. Did you with All Ears English, did you see steady growth or was it a big jump?
We saw a big spike initially. So when we first launched, we messaged everyone we knew. We did do like a proper launch. And again, this is 2013. There were fewer shows, fewer ESL shows for sure. And our branding was a little different from what most people were doing. And that's the other tip, is try to stand out in some way. What was happening in my field in ESL at that time is most people were teachers who were doing podcasts. They weren't putting their faces on the cover. This is 2013, so it's a very different time. Now everyone has their face on the cover. But at that time, I think there was a sense of I have to be professional, or I have to be this, I have to be that. People were speaking very formally on their shows. It felt like taking a classroom lesson and just putting it on a microphone. Instead, what we wanted was a vibe of connection, of conversation, of lightheartedness, laughter. It's okay to make a mistake. We're native speakers too. We also make mistakes when we speak our native language. So it's a very different feel. And so that's why it did spike in the beginning. I think people just liked it. And then we continued to add to that the consistency, and consistently asking people to hit the follow button on the show has helped. So it kind of just fed like success, created more success.
I have sometimes I wonder about, I struggle to ask people to follow because I sort of think like if I like a show, I'm going to follow it. So I sort of have this kind of faith that if people like it, they will. I find it a bit difficult to say, hey, but I get it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you have to remind people, people could know they love a show, but they could just be so busy with other things that you're kind of just saying, hey, do you love this show? Okay, at the top of the show, hit follow now to make sure you don't miss a single episode. It's very simple. I don't think it's very imposing, but it just moves the needle. So, yeah.
So this is a full-time gig for you now, which is amazing. Like the flexibility, the time, the freedom that must allow you must just be, and as you said at the start, like if it's something that feels like an awesome way to express yourself, lean into it. It's very, very cool that it's full-time.
Yeah,
full-time
absolutely.
Gig.
Yeah, I mean, I have my team. We do more in our business. We do more than just podcasting. So we also sell online courses. We have a number of ways we make money. So it's not just the show and the sponsors. There's a pretty built out business model at this point, and I never could have done it without my team, right? So we have a virtual assistant, we have an audio editor, we have 3 other teachers on the team. So thank goodness for them.
Yeah, so there's multiple branches. Yeah. This is the beauty of it too, is that there's multiple branches coming off it. You're offering courses. There's all the different streams
Yeah,
that come off it.
exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
it's amazing that it can grow that way. People might see it as, oh, if you're podcasting, the only way to revenue is XYZ, but there's just so many creative ways to monetize it, which is really
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all about finding that audience that just loves you, the super fans, right? That you found a certain angle in your industry. Once you find that angle, that can turn into a lot of different products and services and live events, things you can do to monetize it, but you need to find the audience and your message. You need to find those two things first.
What does the message look like? You're talking like an overarching key.
Yeah, the key. So, I mean, you hit on it earlier, and I'm really actually glad that you noticed that because that means we're doing our job correctly. Our message is we actually trademarked our slogan. It is connection, not perfection. So, this came out naturally on an episode in somewhere in the first 50 episodes in conversation, and when we hit on it, we said, "Oh my gosh, yes, that's it. That's brilliant. Yeah, that's what we stand for." And so a few years later, we trademarked that in the U.S. Trademark Office. Trademarking something is an affordable way to protect a brand and to create an asset that you eventually could potentially sell if you wanted to or pass on. It is, it's on paper and you do need to kind of defend your trademark a little bit, but I think it's worth it. And so we talk about connection, human connection, and connection, not perfection, this message at the end of every episode or throughout every episode. It's infused everywhere. We created a method in our courses. We call it the connection method, which is linked to a similar idea, but it's just showing them how to actually like learn the mechanics of the language through this connection method. So that's what I mean by your message. It has to come through, and then people will say, ooh, that's for me. Some people say, that's not for me. That's too, I don't know, pie in the sky or woo woo, or it just doesn't resonate. They want like they're true, maybe linguists. They want to go back to the true English and learn it the right way. They're not for us. That's fine. I can recommend other shows for them.
No, so you always come back to that at the core of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I totally get as someone who's struggling with a language every day.
Mm-hmm.
To hear the teachers saying, hey, it's cool, like you don't,
Yeah.
I just remember feeling a lot of pressure in German class, and it was like everybody's in here like trying to wrap their heads around this thing, and we're all in this together, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I was at times I was almost like I wouldn't mind teaching like German without completely like butchering the language, but like this is what you need to get by, and don't worry so much about the mistakes. So it's a very universal and specific message that you have there, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of your show, is it's very clear in all its elements. And I think
Yeah.
that's not so easy. That's not so easy, niche and stuff like that. It's not so easy, particularly in the personal development space. As you can say, it can be
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
broad. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it means that before launching a show or a business in your niche, you need to have obviously some experience in that niche of seeing how it's being done currently, and maybe trying to do the thing that you're teaching or showing yourself. Right? Like I had tried to learn Spanish, had learned Japanese, having a good sample of what's going on now and how could I do it better, and then I think coming back to fundamental human needs, right, is always good. Like connection, right? And there are others. Maybe the need to achieve could be one of them. I don't know. But then, most importantly, you have to really believe it. It can't just be something, obviously, that you hire a marketing firm. They're like, boom, here's your trademark, here's your slogan. No, I've had some intense experiences feeling like I wanted to really connect in that language or even otherwise, just socially, right? And it just wasn't happening. And so you have to believe it deeply as the podcaster or the person delivering the message. And then it's a matter of finding teammates or a team that also resonates with that, and then further training. How are we going to embed this into our message, into our content? Are we doing it? Are we not? There's a lot to do there. So you have to believe it. Whatever it is you're saying, your way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, people have a bullshit radar, so they
yeah, exactly. Huge.
If it's not coming, yeah, and these days particularly, I think if it's not coming from a genuine place, people know that.
Exactly. And also to get to a point of success, it takes a lot of publishing year after year. So it's going to be hard on you if you're just saying a line that you don't believe in to continue doing that,
Exactly,
you
to
know?
sustain it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same as
Yeah.
being in a job that's kind of misaligned or whatever. It can only kind of last so long.
Totally.
For
Yeah.
somebody who might want to start a podcast but doesn't particularly like social media, do you think podcasting has to go hand in hand with social media, or it can be independent of it?
I'm glad you asked that because I'm actually really skeptical about if we're saying social media, I guess we're saying TikTok, Instagram,
Yeah.
Facebook,
Yeah.
Twitter, so whatever. Yeah, I actually don't think that social media converts very well over to podcasting. And I still believe this because a podcast listener is a different type of user than an Instagram user. There are Instagram users and there are podcast listeners. I'm sure there's some overlap, but it doesn't always overlap. And so leave the conversion to Oprah or whoever, whatever famous celebrity is launching a podcast to move them from social to the podcasting world. You just focus on moving listeners from other shows to your shows. Do collabs, do collaborations, do promo swaps. We're doing a promo swap this week with TED Talks Daily, right? So we're going to run a promo for them. They're going to run one for us. Do things like that. So, yeah.
That's also I'm glad you said that because I agree with you. I'm on social media, but I'm not I'm actually just trying to really. This shows a lot about like how can we control our time on our devices and stuff like that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually really trying to manage that. And
Yes.
but looking at it kind of pragmatically, I don't think it necessarily converts either. And
I
so
don't think so. No.
some of the podcasts that I'm a huge fan of, they have no social media presence really.
Yeah.
Some of them, but I mean, some are famous people, but no,
Sure.
it's a breath of fresh air to hear you say that as someone who's had
Yeah.
success in this, that they don't have to go hand in hand.
No. I mean, if we want to talk about growing a podcast, there are much better things we can do, which we can talk about a few of them now if you want. But and
Please, yeah.
we, and we also do have a social media presence too, but it's more for I guess building the audience on those channels and broad brand awareness, right? There's no agenda of we're going to get a certain number of conversions over to the show. It's just a lot of people don't know how to listen to a podcast still, right? So
Mm.
having to teach that on these social channels and move them over, it's just so much easier to find other podcast listeners.
I
you know?
remember when I started and I'd be trying to market my own show and the person would just be looking at me blankly going, I was thinking like, how can I present my show in the best way? And the person would just say, I don't know what a podcast is. And I was like, are you kidding me? You kidding?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. It's a
but,
very different user.
but
Yeah.
what you've said about collaboration and different ways of thinking and like the TEDx thing
Yeah.
you're doing. That seems
Yeah.
such a more streamlined potential for growth there.
Yeah, and there's other things that we do that work really well, and we've tracked them through Chartable, which is shutting down now, but there'll be
Mm.
new ways to track success. One thing we do is we do feed drops. Are you familiar with feed drops, Daniel? What that
N-
concept is?
No,
Kind of.
I'm not.
Okay, so the reason this is easy for us is because we have a network of 3 shows, right? But you could do this just with similar shows that people you want to collaborate with them. They want to grow, you want to grow, reach out to them, come to an agreement. So what you're essentially doing is you're taking one episode of just a unique episode of your show that's not published on your feed. You publish it on their feed, or they publish it for you on their feed. Maybe they do a little intro, a little outro. Hey, here's my friend Lindsay and Michelle from All Ears English. Today they're going to talk about this. By the way, if you love this episode, go over and hit follow on their show. And then I do the same for my friend's show, right? And then I create the intro and the outro. This we've seen has the highest conversion rates, probably second to just going on as a guest on a comparable show. Those two are, I think, the best ways to get
Do
new
you
listeners.
do you keep those in a similar niche or
We do.
like
Yeah.
yeah.
Where I expect most of my conversions are where I either guest on another ESL show or I do a feed drop on another ESL show. So when the audience is not necessarily ESL, maybe it's a mix of US, Australia, England, and global. I don't expect as many conversions, but they're, you can still good to get brand names out there for sure.
Mm. What I think is also really exciting is a podcast network because I have two
Yes.
shows, so I have a
Oh,
channel
cool.
now. And I'm
Yes.
seeing a lot of potential in that in terms of collaborating with people, in terms of because if you've established this is basic stuff I'm saying, but for list, if you've established a network that people are interested in shows on that network, that I think that could open some doors and some collaborations rather than building a show from scratch. You've established this channel or
Mm-hmm.
network. So do you see a lot of potential in
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. So are you saying that you have two shows that you own and co-host, or someone else, another show has
No,
come under your umbrella brand?
I run them both. I co-host one and this one. So I co-host a film review show with my dad
Oh, that's so cool.
because
I
we're
love
both
that.
filmmakers. So
Oh, that's amazing.
that
Yeah.
one's really clear. That one's really clear in terms of we're both film. My dad's a very established documentary maker in Australia, and I'm call it a young filmmaker, even though I'm not so young. But so we review these films. We have the father-son relationship, and we
Mm-hmm.
have filmmaking knowledge. So that one is very, very specific in terms of what it's offering. But we don't do that one as so often. Like it's not a lot of episodes, but we have a number of series on there. But they're both under the network at the moment, under my
Yeah, I think networks are good. I mean, certainly if it makes sense doing a feed drop there, I'm not sure if the audience is quite different
mm,
between the show and that other show you're doing. But I think definitely finding comparable shows to do the feed drop or the promo swaps makes a lot of sense. And then there are also the more formal networks, where a lot of them are their sole purpose is basically to help you get advertisers, right? But sometimes part of those deals that you can arrange and sign on is cross promos. That's also something to look at.
So do you know what does it mean when you kind of the idea of pitching to a network instead of having your own? Is that a
Yeah.
tricky process?
I think it depends on when we define network. It's such a broad term.
Mm,
So, I say that we have the All Ears English Network, which is 3 shows, which brings in a lot of downloads as a network of 3 shows, an outsized number of downloads, but it's a small network and I don't do much direct sales of ads. I do some. I go after, ESL brands, that kind of thing, like tutoring companies. But mostly I work with a larger network that they help me to get brand deals, sponsorships, things like that. We've worked with Toyota, Indeed, Lululemon in the last few years, Rosetta Stone. And so I don't have the contacts with these brands, and they have hundreds of shows that they negotiate for. So that's the value there. And then there are different layers of engagement you can negotiate with them. Are they going to host your show and get you promo swaps and collaborations, or are they just going to get you ads? Like, it just depends on what you need and what they need and kind of making a deal. But I do think there is some value. I would have said a few years ago, oh, just do it all yourself. But realistically, if I send an email to Lululemon, I mean, I don't know if I'm
no,
going to get
yeah, donuts.
yeah, right. So yeah, we've been able to get some really nice brand partnerships through working with a network.
Has AI been something that has been intimidating or something you've embraced in terms of podcasting?
Good question. I don't have an answer for that yet. We haven't done a lot yet with AI, especially within podcasting. We use Descript, and Descript has like an eye contact tool, which is kind of interesting. We've been kind of playing around with that. Not sure what I think about it yet. But broadly in the language learning space, I do see a lot of my peers going in on some tools which essentially creates a clone of them. So they're content creators. They're creators, either YouTube stars or podcasters. And this AI tool basically consumes everything they've created and creates a clone of them. And so what they're doing is they're driving their audience to go and work with this clone in like live, semi-live engagement sessions.
Yeah, that's
So
wild.
speaking to the clone, I
That's
haven't.
wild.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I'm kind of stepping back a little bit and waiting to see what happens. I'm a little wary of just like having a robot consume all of my content, though I know it's probably already doing it somewhere, anyways. um, I don't know. I think you have to have an eye on it, but I'm not like going to be a first mover because I'd rather be Google than Yahoo. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like I have to be in it now. Maybe within
Yeah,
the next couple of years, see what's going on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on it. No,
Hmm.
I agree. Um,
Yeah.
it's a tradition to have guests offer some kind of challenge on the show. Now, this could be absolutely anything. Was there
Yeah.
something that has benefited, like in terms of your own personal time management or anything like that?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're obviously quite busy and you have to be quite disciplined with all this, especially if you're running multiple shows. Maybe that's a thing, or is this, or
Yeah.
learning a language or podcasting? Is there anything that springs to
Yeah.
mind?
Well, sure. So earlier, Daniel, you mentioned, I think you mentioned technology and, well, time management, certainly. One thing that I've done, so what was the problem? I was noticing that I was spending a lot of time on my phone before bed. So technology in bed before I'm trying to go to sleep was hindering my sleep quite a bit. And one decision I made a few months ago, as I said, the phone does not mesh with the bedroom. So I'm going to leave my phone at night in my office, charge it, and I bought an old school clock. It looks like something from the 80s. Love it. Reminded me of my childhood. An old school clock that you wind and then you just set the alarm. There's no technology. And so that's helped me a lot. So now I'm just reading before bed. And because I work so hard, I create so much content. There's so much going on in our business. I really need that disconnection. Whereas if I was reading the New York Times before bed, I was staying hooked into the stories, the politics, which right now are a little stressful, at least in the US. I think in the whole world, politics are stressful at the moment. And that wasn't a great way to get my best sleep. And so truly separating from your technology in like half an hour before bed has helped me a lot.
That's a great one. There's no
Yeah.
doubt that it just, yeah, like even to have a good hour before, and yeah, and
Yeah.
you're right, like that old school alarm. The thing is, when we turn the alarm off on the phone, it's like a 1 second decision to then check something else, and next thing you know,
Exactly.
you're down a half an hour rabbit hole. And the morning
Yes.
time is so crucial, and it can be hijacked from you by this device. And neither of us are denying these devices, but again, it's
Right.
how we use it. So I think that's
Yeah.
leaving it outside the bedroom
Yeah.
is
And
huge.
it's also a really good, I'm into meditation and studying Buddhism and that kind of thing, but that could be another episode for another day. But the idea of observing your mind and the hooks that your mind gets into. So since I've started doing this, I've also noticed moments when I wanted to, I'll just Google it. Because maybe my partner and I were talking about something, I'll just Google that or I'll just check that. I really want to know that thing at 10:50 p.m. when I'm supposed to turn the light out at 11, right? And I see the mind and then I just observe it and I say, I don't have that option right now.
Mm.
So it's not just improving sleep. It's also getting into the habit of observing the way the mind works.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if we're fully aware of how many hours we're losing to these things in terms of what's like productive. If we I mean, there's all the stats on the phone and everything, but I think over a lifetime,
Mm.
in terms of what it's actually giving us relative to the times we spend on it, it's really, really crazy. And I'm, this is just a huge issue for me as well. So it's like all of it. I don't know too many people who are not hooked to these things in some way because they shape our behaviors and stuff. So the night thing is an excellent,
Yeah.
excellent challenge.
Yeah. It makes me nostalgic for the 80s. I grew up in the 80s,
I,
80s and 90s when, we
I
didn't have that option.
the 80s. It's so awesome that we lived in the
Oh, I'm
pre and the
so
post.
glad. We went outside. We
I, s-
built forts. We
I,
yeah.
I spent, I, s- I, s- yeah, I start to feel feel the age a bit, but it was literally like go outside and entertain yourself for the next
Yeah,
4 hours and just
exactly. Yeah.
now
I miss it. Go outside. I don't know if kids go outside anymore, right? So it's reclaiming a little bit of your freedom there. Freedom can be defined in a lot of ways.
yes.
Yeah.
But I think you doing this full time and having successfully set yourself up to be able to do this full time, I think there's an element of freedom there. And that's the beauty of this.
Yeah.
Also being kind of globally independent in terms of, we've connected like this. This is what's
Yeah.
really, really cool about it, this kind of global independence of it as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing. I just went to see my parents who are getting older and I'm trying to cherish every moment I have with them. So I flew to Boston over the weekend, took Friday afternoon off, worked from the airport, right? Worked a little from the airport on Monday and just kind of built my schedule and decided I wanted to go see them and that was it. So
You
there's
can,
real freedom there too.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can do that spontaneously. That's
Yeah.
very cool. Where can people find you and all the shows?
Sure. Yeah. So if they're already listening to this as a podcast, they can just open their search bar right there in Apple Podcasts or Spotify and type in All Ears English. They'll see our yellow branding where all our shows are bright yellow. So they'll notice us and they can hit follow. Or if they're on YouTube, we also do have a YouTube channel for All Ears English. So they can just type in All Ears English and hit the subscribe button. If they are, if they're learning English as a second language, then as adults, it's the perfect. Or if they just want to check out our content and the way we've built our brand, check it out for sure.
Awesome. Like I said, there's so many different layers to this, and I feel like we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg that's
Yeah.
beneath the.
Right.
So yeah, have to do it again. But no, it was really. I very much appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being the 100th guest.
What an honor. Thank you, Daniel, for having me on. I've enjoyed our chat. Thank you so much.
There you go, guys. Honest ratings for the show on Apple are appreciated. If you have a guest suggestion, please feel free to reach out on my website at danielthomas.co. I'm also on social media at Mr. Dan Thomas. Catch you on the next episode.